Hey guys, welcome back to the Holistic Sovereign Show. My name is Lisa Ivanovna. We're back with John, my co-host, and we're super excited for today's episode because we are going to be talking about income, money, and everything else that goes with it. And when I say those words, I mean exactly the words. We're looking at the definitions of these things, of these words, not things. But it's been a very prevalent topic in our lives recently. For myself, I know that I make it a habit of looking up words in an etymology dictionary. You can just look up etymolene online and, use that, or just get an actual etymology dictionary, a physical copy, why not? And look up certain words because that's how you get to the real meaning of words because you get back to the root cause of it or the root of the word. And so, income, as we have come to realize in our communication, is how this entire system operates, is based on an assumption of what we believe income to mean or to be. And the word assumption is very important here because when you actually try to find a definition of income in the different statutes, laws, all these different things, you actually can't find just one cohesive definition. So that just goes to show you the system is built on something that is very confusing, right? And when I say that it's built on this idea of income, a lot of the conversation that we end up having in this freedom space and the sovereignty space is around money, credits, and income, taxes. It's all financial because obviously this is all at the highest levels. It's all around, trusts and banking, a little bit lower than the trust, but that's kind of what it comes down to. And so I think that having this conversation about income is super important. I would love, John, if you could get into, because John has been just kind of scouring things and putting stuff together here. If you can talk about how there is not just a singular definition of income that we can find across the different statutes and laws.
So recently, a friend of mine was applying for something. And if you look up the word apply, what you're doing when you apply for something is you beg. And when you start getting into um, money, uh, everyone assumes what a definition is. And on applications, job applications, applications for benefits, there's tons of applications out when you're quote begging for these things, which you have to really back up even then and ask yourself, should you be applying in the first place? Like maybe you should just put in a demand. But on these applications, let's back up. Let's just go all the way back to when you're talking to anyone in the government, what we'll call the government, right? Be it police, judges, attorneys, and even when you're talking to your quote, your own attorney, there's a different type of language that is used when you and I are talking to each other, or when you're talking to your kids or your parents or a friend, versus when you're talking in a legal arena. It is a completely different ball game. And most folks who have not studied or poured over this stuff make an enormous mistake. And they think that the words that are being used, because they sound and look like English, mean the same thing. And when you're asked a question, it's impossible to give an intelligent answer unless you know what the question means. And in order to understand the question, you must not only understand the context, you must understand the individual words therein. So, going over this application, this friend was putting down their income, and it said, please list your income, please. And let me get the specific wording here because I even grabbed this. It said list what money do people in your household get? List the person's name and the monthly amount. If you leave a space blank, we will take that to mean there is no money of this kind. You said something about screen share earlier, Lisa.
Hmm.
Is there any way we could share my screen there?
Yeah, you should be able to if you just do
Oh,
the
it's
share
my
button on
it's
the
my
bottom.
thing. Here we go.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me just share my entire screen. Let's see what happens there. Does that work?
Yep.
So here's this application, and it doesn't matter what the application is for. It doesn't matter what state or even what country it's for. What it says here is list what money do people in your household get? And I said, well, back up. I said, what's the definition of some words here? First off, we have the word household. Now, the word household is actually defined at the beginning of this application. And get, there's another one, and might look that one up. But the word that really stands out to me here, besides the word people, because what's a people? We've got we the people, we have persons, we have men, we have women, we have all kinds of words to refer to corporations and to ourselves. People's an interesting one, but the word money, what's the word money mean? It says list the person's name and the monthly amount. If you leave a space blank, so here they're going to tell us their assumptions. And something folks should remember is an unrebutted assumption is true. So Lisa, if I say to you, hey, I want you to buy me lunch, and we well, let's just say I say, hey, let's go to lunch, and you say, okay. So we jump in your car, we head over, and I say on the way there, I say, by the way, it's my assumption that you're going to buy, and you don't rebut that assumption, then guess what? You've agreed. It's called agreement by acquiescence. When you are silent in a matter where you have an obligation to speak, then you can create a contract. A lot of contracts are never spoken. People talk about how they have to have, a contract's supposed to be written. Well, not only does a contract not have to be written, it can be verbal. It can actually be just unspoken. If I walk into your restaurant, pick up a broom and start sweeping, and you allow me to do so, if I act like an employee and you treat me like an employee, then I'm owed pay. Well, it's interesting that they say no money of this kind because they're talking about different kinds of money. Now, someone may look at that and they may say, well, here's the problem, John. They list the kinds of money. There's money from work, there's self employment, there's tips. But is tips different kinds of money from like if you come over to my house and I hand you a $10 bill, is that a different kind of money depending on why I hand it to you? But the real, and we can question that all day. I mean, one sentence can contain so many words. But the real question here is what is money? What money? So I have this thing that I love. It's called a Black's Law Dictionary. And I have the sixth edition. I think you said you have what, the fourth?
I have the fourth. I believe in the Facebook group under files. If it's not there, I'll upload the PDF that I have because I have the Black's Law fourth edition. I think we
Mm-hmm.
might have the sixth in under the files in the Facebook group. If you guys want to get into the Facebook group, it's down in the description. Just click that link, request to join, and then just go under the files and we'll have that in there for you. It'll either be the sixth or the fourth. I don't know.
And it doesn't really matter which version you get, just get one.
Just
Uh,
get one. Yeah.
just get one. And you can buy them on Amazon very inexpensively. I have a Black's Law. A very dear friend bought me a Black's Law first recently, and I'll set with both Black's Law dictionaries and can literally, some people like to just scroll on their phones. I can sit, and the problem is I'll get distracted when I go to look up a word. So let's look at the definition of the word money. Before this video, I actually grabbed some things from Black's Law, and let's dig into this real quick. And because we always have these assumptions, and everybody says, well, about assumptions, they make an ass out of you and me. Well, we assume so many things,
Yeah.
and all too often it's a mistake. So let's look at the definition of money. Now I'm trying to bring that up here. Here we go. Okay, so money. In usual and ordinary acceptation, it means coins and paper currency used as circulating medium of exchange. Now, up to that point, everybody says, "Yeah, okay, I already know that's totally awesome. Like that's what I would have assumed." But then it says, "and does not embrace notes, bonds, evidences of debt, or other personal or real estate." Let's work backwards here. We've got real estate, which is land and houses that are attached, and then we have personal estate. Personal estate is movable. Real estate is not movable generally. I know they move houses, but generally it's not movable. And then if we go up here, it says it doesn't embrace notes. If you pull a dollar out of your pocket and look at the top, it's labeled Federal Reserve note. That's an indicator that maybe, just maybe, what we have in our hands is not money when we're holding a United States dollar.
Yep.
Bonds or evidences of debt. Now, this is a very, very deep subject, and you can literally spend years studying this, what the root of it is, where it comes from. Our current monetary system, to my understanding, to the point that I understand right now, pretty much began in Babylon and progressed in Rome. And it brings us to our modern day where it hasn't really changed all that much. So, used to, money was something valuable, a piece of gold, silver, something that had inherent intrinsic value.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, if I was on one side of a desert and Lisa was on the other, and I wanted to send her payment for something, let's just say some goods came across the desert to me, and I wanted to send her payment for that, 100 shekels. I would probably give those 100 shekels, which are valuable coins made out of gold or silver or something like that. And I would give it to a courier, and the courier would run it across to Lisa. Now, the problem with that being is if the courier got knocked off the horse and whacked on the head, somebody might steal that money and it's gone. So what they figured out was they could just take a piece of paper, and I could give my shekels to a fellow in my country, my town, and then I could make what's called a promissory note or promise to pay, or a note that represented that money. And then if that courier got knocked on the head and that note got taken, we would just cancel the note and reissue a new note and make the other note void. It's kind of like when you lose a check. And then something unintended happened. They started issuing more notes than the amount of gold that they had on hand. And anybody who's studied what happened in the 20s and early 30s in the United States knows that the so-called bank crash, the Great Depression, and there was a bank run. So luckily for us, in 1912, some really smart, really rich folks met at Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia, and they put together a new system,
Mm-hmm.
the Federal Reserve System. And then in 1935, they confiscated the gold, and now we have something called promissory notes. But it says note, although it really isn't actually a note. I have really taken an affinity to going backwards and forth with AI, like ChatGPT, and I think it has a lot of wonderful applications. I don't think it's intrinsically evil. I think, like any other tool, it could be used for evil. And I'm ready to abandon it at any time. But I do enjoy bantering backwards and forth with it, asking questions and getting it to write me stuff, review stuff, and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I asked it was, is a dollar bill actually a promissory note? And right here you can see that it puts together a chart where it says that a promissory note is a promise to pay, and a promissory note is a check. That's what it is. It's a check, just like when we write a check off of a personal or private bank account. And I'm using a lot of words that I know that if people have been around for a little bit, if they're part of the old school folks that have been studying this stuff for a while, they're like, "Well, there's no such thing as a private bank account, John." Yeah, I know, but we gotta use some words for it, right? So a promissory note has it's a promise to pay, express unconditional promise to pay. A Federal Reserve note does not. Negotiable instruments are governed by the UCC. The Federal Reserve note is not negotiable. There are some things that are the same, and there are some things that are different. However, and I'm just flipping through some pictures here to get to one I want. When we transitioned into what we call a fiat currency, and the system we have today is fiat. It's not backed by a physical commodity like gold or silver. The note evolved from a redeemable promise to a declaration of legal tender. So what we have today is a declaration of legal tender. But if I'm going to pay Lisa for something, let's say that she sells me that picture behind her there on the wall, and I hand her a gold coin, the debt has been discharged. It no longer exists, and no other party was brought into that transaction. It was just me and Lisa. However, if I hand her a $10 Federal Reserve note, we've not discharged the debt, because to discharge means to completely get rid of it. If you discharge a firearm, you can't use that round again. It's discharged. It's gone. It's out, down the barrel. The primer's burnt, the powder's burnt, the lead's down the barrel. But if I hand her a $10 Federal Reserve note, all we've done is taken that debt and transferred it. It's gone from me to the backer of the note. Now, we could get into whether the backer of the note is the United States Treasury or the Federal Reserve System, Federal Reserve Bank. And, anyone who studies this for any length of time will realize the Federal Reserve Bank is neither federal nor does it have a reserve. And it's not really a bank either. But I inherently have nothing against this monetary system. I personally would not want to redesign it. So I'm okay with how it's operating right now. I don't think that, and here's where we get to the part, Lisa, where later we get some good comments on our videos and reactions. I do not think that the banks cause our problem. I don't think that the government causes our problem. I do not think that the IRS causes our problem. I don't think the police cause our problem. I think the problems that we have in our lives are caused by us. If someone is taking advantage of us, it is because we have not delved in and tried to understand it. I personally would not jump into a boxing ring. I wouldn't. I can swing, I can kick, I can jump and dance around, but I would get absolutely wailed on by a professional boxer. And when you step into a courtroom, when you talk to a police officer, when you talk to an attorney, when you walk in and you talk to a banker, you are talking to people who have taken the time to learn the rules, albeit at different levels. I mean, police officers really don't know law. Most attorneys don't really know law, which is going to really upset a few attorneys who are probably going to watch this podcast. And that's okay, because when you're telling truth, it really makes people upset.
Yeah.
So when you step into this game, if you want to win, or even if you just want to hold your own, you need to figure out the game. And it is a game. I've had more than one attorney and even a few judges tell me that it's a game. And it's a game with some severe consequences, but it's still a game. I mean, Russian roulette has severe consequences, but they call it a game. Can you end up hurt? Yes. Should you play? Probably not. But the game of commerce, you have to play. You can't get out of it. There's no way. And so the system we have isn't that bad of a system. It's just we don't know how to use it. And so what happens is the people that do know how to use it. I mean, think about this. If I sit down and Lisa, you and I were to play checkers or chess, and you're really good at it, and I'm terrible, should you just let me win? Well, the funny thing is they actually do sometimes just let us win. So I want to show this right here. SNAP, of course, is food stamps, and I'm not using this because I'm advocating applying for welfare, not applying for welfare. I don't care. This is just language, and I want to focus on the language. That's it. That's the only reason we're even using this. We could pull up an application for a job. We could pull up an application for just about any number of things and find similar language, because it's all words, right? It says, follow these rules. Do not hide or give wrong information on purpose to get SNAP benefits. And you'll notice I have the words on purpose highlighted in orange and the rest in green. Does that mean that maybe, just maybe, they know, the people that wrote this form know that the folks filling it out might be assuming, and in their assumptions, they might be giving wrong information accidentally? I think
When we
so.
go back to looking at the whole conversation of what is income and money coming into the household, none of us have money coming into our households. None of us have money that we're exchanging with, period. Because if we go back to the definition of money, it's not what the US dollar is. The US dollar is a debt note,
It
right?
is.
Which is not included in the definition of money. So if we go back to that form of what money is coming into your household, if you don't know that information, we have a wonderful dog here. If you don't know that information,
Oh, yes, yes.
then
He's quite the pup.
if you don't know that information, then you are, without knowing, putting incorrect information on that form, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, as far as the benefits go, that is just another game, right? Just like everything else in the system is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have recently applied to see as an experiment what what I can do and to learn more, right? Because what y'all have to realize too, I know it's very polarizing. A lot of people have very strong opinions about welfare, about these different things. You know, the very common, I think, attitude, especially with people who lean more conservative, tend to be like, well, these people just banking off the system and they're, using our tax dollars. Why am I paying for this? I have great news for you. You're not. They're not using
No,
tax
you're not at
dollars.
all.
They're not using tax dollars whatsoever. They're
Mhm.
actually using the credits that are available through the Social Security number because that is an account, and that's a whole other rabbit hole that we can talk about. But just know anytime you're giving your Social Security number for anything, then they are going to tap that and multiply it on the market. Okay, that's just, and it's just good business for them, right, to do that. Now, the issue is it's also illegal what they do if they use your social security account and tap into it, and then you don't receive a benefit for it. So this goes for welfare. This also goes for credit. Okay, and these are all things that John and I are like very actively working on right now personally because we don't advocate teaching anything that we haven't done ourselves. I think that's a pet peeve for both of us is hearing people talk about things and it's just concepts rather than actual learned experience. So we like to do everything that we're going to talk to you about and teach about. However, going back to the income, right? So the point that I wanted to make is again, I want to go back to talking about assumptions. Okay, the word assumption is so important here because what you do when you look at a form, whether it's for a credit card or it's for a applying for welfare or applying for a job, whatever it is, you are making a lot of assumptions. And what's happening is the other party, okay, I'll say in a lot of ways, sometimes your adversary, if you
Mhm.
will, is banking on you making a lot of assumptions and not questioning. Okay, so we have to go back to our conversation about why did Jesus ask so many questions? He asked more questions than he answered. I'm going to say that again. If you read through the Gospels, he asked more questions than he answered. Why is that? Well, he was modeling how we should conduct ourselves in this realm. And we've done quite the opposite because what the devil has done has come in and done is has made us operate based on a lot of assumptions. Okay. Assumption
Mhm.
is the name of the game for the devil. He gets away with a lot because he gets you to assume a lot of things, and
Mhm.
then he can get away with legalism and intimidation, saying, well, you assumed this, so you agreed to it, right? He
That's
gets you
right.
to agree through assumption, but what's actually happening is you have two different definitions and you didn't actually think through getting absolute clarity, right? So this is where having this knowledge and this approach is so important in anything that you do, right? Because, everything is contracting. And yeah, so the point that I was making, and the story that I kind of wanted to tell is I was applying for a program, and I had to go in for an interview, and they were very adamant about having proof of income. And what I had done is I had typed up a wonderful affidavit, an affidavit of income declaration, and I wrote in there, I have no income. And I will swear that in a court under penalty of perjury, I have no income, right? And I had uploaded that, and uploaded everything in their little online portal before I went for the appointment. And what happened then is they kept hounding me about getting evidence of the proof of income. And I said, I already gave it to you. So, she goes back. She says, okay, we did receive that affidavit. However, we still need, she was kind of, it was so interesting. She didn't really know what she was doing, it felt like, or what to say. So, they have this affidavit, and she was implying that she can't use that as the proof of income. She wasn't outright saying it because she can't say that. And I at one point said to her, because she kept telling me, well, this program is based off of income. And I said, okay, so if I have no income, I can't be part of the program. And she kind of pauses, and she can't
Mhm.
say no. She can't say yes, right? I mean, either way, because it,
Mhm.
it wouldn't be true. So she goes back and says, okay, I'll go see what I can find out. Well, eventually they end up accepting it, but what happened was she wanted me to write out my expenses. Well, the first thing she did was she said, if there's someone helping you with expenses, they need to fill out paperwork. She hands me this form. I read through it. It's essentially for someone to say, I am financially providing, monthly for this person to, to pay for their expenses. And I hand it back to her and I said, well, I can't fill this out because it would be inaccurate. I don't want to give you false information because there isn't anybody that's, paying for my expenses. So she ends up saying, okay, well, what you can do is just on the back of that paper, just write out your expenses and we'll just accept that as proof of income. And I said, okay. So I just wrote out
Expense,
a couple of
expenses as proof
expenses.
of income. That's interesting.
I wrote out, isn't that
Really.
isn't that interesting? That's the whole other rabbit hole.
Mhm.
So I said, okay, well, then I wrote out a couple of expenses, and I wrote a statement under it. I said, no person in my household, I was very intentional with my wording, no person in my household has any income per the definition of my previously submitted affidavit of income declaration, signed
Mhm.
without recourse, with my name and with my strawman name. So that was that, So even if they wanted to use that, they would still have to use the affidavit because I'm referencing it in the statement that I gave. So I ended up, it ended up working out. They accepted me. They were like, whatever, it's fine. And I was very pleasant with everybody. But the point of that story is, again, if I didn't know what I was doing going in, I would be making a lot of assumptions. Instead, I was saying, okay, even when she handed me that form to, have someone fill out that was helping me pay for expenses, I read through it and I said, okay, what exactly do you need me to fill out here? And she says, it was so funny because the sections were labeled one, like with Roman numerals, like one, two, three. She said, we need you to fill out section A. There was no section A. It was Roman numerals. So I said, do you mean section one? She says, yes. I said, okay. So, and then I read through it and I said, okay, what exactly do you need me to do here? And she said, okay, well, this is for somebody that blah, 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 what I just read on there. And I said, okay, but I can't give you that information. That would be false. So, the point of that being, all of us can use to not assume things because that is how, again, like I said, your adversary is going to take advantage of you, and they want to turn people away from applying for these things. And I'll hand it over to John here in a second because
No,
um,
you're doing good.
what you what you found out from calling the office
Hmm.
is that all of these forms aren't even necessary, that you could
Correct.
just write a demand letter. Like all of this is optional. So the more information that you are giving them, the more that they have to use against you. I need y'all to understand this. The more you're giving them, the more that they have to use against you, the more that you give them jurisdiction. Okay, so that goes back to our previous conversation of jurisdiction, right? The more information I'm giving them, the more I'm giving them jurisdiction to make decisions for me. However, if I am of the in the know that okay, these benefits are available to me, they're using my credits, right? They're technically not mine. They're, this imaginary account that they've created, right? But they're using my name to monetize, right? So they're technically, if we're gonna speak, in terms of me, my ownership, they're my credits because they're in my name. They're using my name. And so I might as well get access to that, right? Via whether it's welfare, whether it's credit cards. Okay. Bankers lending you. They're not lending you anything. They're just giving you access to credit that is rightfully yours, right? Because it's in your name. That's why they ask for your social security number. So my point being here again is assumptions, right? We want to look at those assumptions. And we want to make sure that we're very careful about how we conduct ourselves in those situations. And also goes back to knowing yourself, knowing who you are. But what I found most fascinating is between, John and I's conversations is when he called into the office and found out that the forms aren't even necessary. So if I know that, again, they're using my credits for this, I can just write them a demand letter. I can just write an affidavit and say, hey, I want, the maximum amount of benefits, or I want the maximum amount of, credit available to me through this, because that's what I'm about to go through too, is because we're really getting into this again. Like I said, we're deep, we like to dig our hands into stuff. Is what I'm about to start doing is writing letters to banks that I've applied for credit because I've gotten a few denials. So that's actually illegal for them to do. Just by the way, like I said earlier, is if you have given your social and you don't get any benefit in return for it, then that is illegal. So then I'm gonna write them a very nice letter and say, hey, I don't think you meant to do this. Because per these USC laws, right, this United States Code, actually this is illegal. So, I'm just looking out for you, and I just wanted to make sure that this mistake got corrected. So I didn't have to do any adverse, actions. So you can go ahead and reverse that denial into an approval if you so feel like staying out of trouble. So, so again, That's what this whole thing is about. But again, assumptions, very important to look at, and also know who you are, know your rights, stand on them, and you have a lot more power than you think you do. All right, I'll get off my soapbox.
It's funny you said know who you are because I was just writing down some notes as you were talking. And I wrote down five things that, because we do want to get into the words and what money is, but even more importantly is your approach and your attitude.
Yeah.
Um, I have been accused in certain legal forums of being a sovereign citizen, which is an oxymoron. And I am very good at recognizing oxymorons because at one point in my life, I was in military intelligence. My entire job was an oxymoron, military plus intelligence. And the thing is the sovereign citizen phrase is a weaponized phrase. I've written papers about how I detest the whole sovereign citizen movement. Yet it still persists that in certain court cases I have been accused of being a sovereign citizen. And here's the thing: it is okay to have a name, a legal name. It's okay to have a social security number and use it. In order to play Monopoly, you have to have a Monopoly piece. And the great thing about what Lisa and I are going to be teaching as we go on down this road is you don't have to be afraid of any of this. There's no reason to be afraid, but there's also very few reasons to be angry. There is such a thing as righteous anger. You have to have discernment in order to apply that righteous anger. 99.9% of all the people who are out there working government jobs, working for attorneys, working wherever, the banks, they're trying to do the right thing. And honestly, we need them. I don't want to try to recreate this entire system. Right now, if I had the ability to push a button and completely take away that thing which we call government today, we found out take all the people and find them new jobs. We take all the buildings, repurpose them, we burn all the papers. Tomorrow, we're going to want to contract. And what are you going to do? Because I don't know about you, Lisa, but I don't trust everyone to act honorably. And when someone that you have contracted with does not act honorably, what do you do about it? The system we have is pretty rational, it's pretty logical. It is in large part based on what I call pretend. You have to pretend. In order for us to work, to exist in this system, we do have to pretend that a Federal Reserve note of face value is money. But that doesn't mean that while you're playing the Monopoly game that you think it's real. If you land in the little square that says go to jail, I would say you would be making a grave error by getting your butt up and walking to the county jail and demanding to be put in a cell. It's okay to pretend when you know you're pretending. Children do it all the time. That is why it's easier for children to learn truth and get close to God, and actually are probably already closer to God than it is for an adult. I would rather teach these basics to a group of 20-year-olds than to a group of 40-year-old attorneys because there's so much that has to be unlearned. The funny thing is most attorneys and almost all your judges know that a lot of what we're doing is pretend. And I have watched as both attorneys, judges, police, and multiple officials have tried to help people. And I saw an instance a couple of years back of someone in a courtroom, and the judge was trying to help the so-called defendant, absolutely telling him, "Don't say this, don't say this, don't say this, do this, do this, do this." Person wouldn't listen, wouldn't listen. They couldn't stand it. They had to get themselves in trouble, and we've all done that. And so the five things that I wrote while you were talking is number one is your approach. You have to. There is a good assumption to make. Anytime you go into something, assume that you're the one who's making the mistake or has made the mistake. That's a good assumption to make. It's okay to assume that. Number two is your attitude. If you go into things with a really bad attitude, thinking, "Oh, these people are defrauding me, and they're just out to get me," yeah, you're going to have a very difficult time. You really will. Number three, you have to understand the system. Who in the world can box and not know the rules of boxing? Who can play Monopoly and not know the Monopoly rules? Who can play a card game and not know the rules of the game that you're playing?
Hmm.
Number four, you have to know who you are. You really do. And that is at a very, very granular level. One of the things that I often do when I speak to a group is first thing I'll tell them right out the gate is at the end of this class, you will agree with what I'm about to say, which is you don't know who you are, you don't know where you live, you don't know what your country is, you don't know what your job is, you don't know what money is, you don't know what a residence is, you don't know what you own, and you don't know what you don't own. You have no idea who you are. And people will laugh, but at the end of the class, I'll get agreement. You're right. I had no idea. So, what we're trying to do here, and this is difficult, Lisa and I are trying to take you back to the very beginning and explain you've got to know what the meaning of the words are. And when you're in this game of contract, you are not in a realm where the words mean what you think they mean. Modern parlance changes constantly. I never forget the first time a youngster looked at me and said, "Man, that is so bad." And he was talking about something I thought was good. I said, "What do you mean it's bad?" He said, "Yeah, it's bad." I said, "But it's expensive." And he said, "I know it's really good, but what I mean is it's bad." They change the meaning of the words. Satan inverts these things all the time. A judge from the 1600s could talk to a judge from today, and they could have a pretty good grounded conversation using the legal language because it doesn't change that much. Now, they do change it. They have to as we go, but it doesn't change that much. So we look at earlier, you were talking about an expense, and I was trying to bring up the Black's Law Dictionary. This is the sixth edition of what an expense is. That which is expended, laid out, or consumed. And generally, with these definitions, there will be a lot. Like this expense definition might go on for 3 pages. Generally, you can look at the very first part of it and get a pretty good idea. Notice that underneath this, they start going into types of expenses: accrued expense, business expense, current expense, operating expense. You cannot understand what a word is if you define it with the word that you're trying to define. It would be like if you met someone who had no idea what a hippopotamus was, and they said, "Can you define what a hippopotamus is?" I've no idea. I've never heard it before. And I say a hippopotamus is a thing that walks, talks, eats, and looks like a hippopotamus. That's illogical. It doesn't work. So if I say, if I tell you to put down a current expense and you say, okay, a current, and you say, what's a current expense? And I say, well, it's a normal expense incurred. For example, in daily operations of a business. If you assume what the definition of expense is, you're missing a block. You've just assumed that the definition of a hippopotamus is a thing that looks like a hippopotamus. What's the definition of expense? You cannot know what an operating expense is or a current expense is unless you know what an expense is. And an expense is the expenditure of money. Oh, there we go, right there. There we are. Money. What's a money? What is a money? Well, a few minutes ago, we looked up what the definition of money is. And the definition of money is in usual and ordinary acceptation, it means coins and paper currency used as circulating medium of change and does not embrace notes, bonds, evidences of debt, or other personal or real estate. Now, we're going to dig in just a little deeper here. There are generally two types of money that we deal with in everyday life. One is Federal Reserve notes of face value. Listen to that again, a Federal Reserve note of face value. A $1 bill, a $2 bill, a $3 bill. Oh, there's another word, bill. You want to have some fun, go look up the word bill in Black's Law. It goes on for 3 pages, maybe 4. It's long, really long. But in usual and ordinary acceptation, it means coins and paper currency used circulating medium of change. It does not embrace notes, bonds, evidences, debt, or other personal or real estate. Federal Reserve notes of face value is one. But what if you go to a bank and you put that money in a bank account and they give you a ledger, a balance? Those are credits. They're credits on account. We only really see two types of money mainly in our system at our level. It's, but there's lots. I mean, many, many, many types. Futures, bonds, all this stuff. That's all money, right? A coupon. If you have a coupon for Myers or Walmart, that's money. Now it's a restricted type of money. It's restricted in its use, but it's still money. So a credit on account. Let's think of that for just a second. You have two types of estate. You have real estate and personal estate. Personal estate is stuff that can be moved. It's in real estate is stuff that can't be moved. So I asked AI a question. I said, if I have, well, it was about money in a bank account. Do I have money in a bank account? And here's what it said. It said, according to the definition provided in Black's Law Dictionary, if I have 100 credits on account in a personal bank account, that would not qualify as money in the strict sense of the term as defined there. Here's why. Money is coins and paper currency used to circulate medium of exchange. Now, we know the paper currency even itself can't be really called money, but it doesn't embrace notes. It also doesn't embrace personal estate. It does not embrace intangible personal property. What do you got when you got credits on account? Is that money in that bank account? God, I'm starting to sound like Morpheus. Were you listening, or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? Do you
I
think
think
that's
that's air you're breathing.
Yes, yes, yeah. Yep. By the way, The Matrix was not a movie for entertainment; it was a documentary. So, if you have credits on account, and somebody says, "Do you have money in a bank account?" Well, first off, is that money in the bank account? Second off, is that account yours? I can actually prove that you own nothing, and that'll be another rabbit hole we go down later. You own
Oh yeah.
absolutely nothing. You don't own your vehicle, you don't own your land, you don't own your clothes. Here's a good little thing I like to do with folks. I like to do a little mind exercise. Let's just say that I'm in my house and I decide that I would like some bread, some milk, and a carton of cigars. I don't smoke cigars, but let's just say I want them. And so I send my son, Timmy, down to Lisa's store. Lisa has a store. It's about a mile away. It's a dry goods store, but it's also got some milk in it. And I say, Timmy, I want you to go get these items. And I give Timmy a shopping list, but I also give Timmy a note. And on that note, I put a date, an amount, a signature, and it's a promise to pay. And I give to Timmy the note, and Timmy goes down to Lisa's store and he picks up the items. He hands Lisa the note, and on the note it says, "Hey Lisa, we're gonna meet for a poker game on Friday night. I will pay you then when I see you." So I'm putting in a promise to pay at a definitive time. So it's a true note. It has a date, it has an amount, it has a signature. It's got all the elements of a note. Timmy has now got the goods. He's surrendered the note. He's walking back home. Halfway between the store, Lisa's store, and my house, at that moment, who owns the goods? I ask this very often, and it's always fun to see because there's only three possible answers. Either little Timmy owns the goods, or Lisa owns the goods, or I own the goods. And usually, a lot of times, people will say Timmy owns the goods, but Timmy's just an agent in commerce. And by being an agent in commerce, Timmy doesn't own the goods. It would be like FedEx owning or UPS or the Postal Service owning your parcel as they take it. Lisa doesn't own it because she just surrendered the goods and accepted the note. Now, have I paid for the goods? No, I've issued a promissory note. The person who owns the goods is the issuer of the note. That would be me in this case. But if you go to Walmart and you buy an item like a pack of pencils for $1 and you hand $1 over to the cashier, who owns what you're walking out of the store with? Even when you get it home, who owns it? Did you issue the note? What did you use to pay? You ever wonder why they have this thing called asset forfeiture laws where the government can just come in and take your stuff? It's because it ain't your stuff. Even if you pay cash for it, it's not your stuff. So, according to this right here, it says a practical interpretation. It says, if someone asks if you have money in everyday language, there it is in everyday language. When you're talking to a judge, a cop, a banker, are you
You zoom
talking?
in a little on it?
What's that?
Would you zoom in on it a little? There you go.
Most people would consider your 100 credits in the bank as money because you can use it to pay for things electronically or withdraw it as cash, which we even know the cash isn't money. We haven't even looked up the definition of cash, but folks watching are going to have to get their own dictionaries because this gets deep. In the legal sense, those credits are not money until they are converted into cash or coins. They're actually not even money when they're converted into cash in our system because those are just legal tender. They're not money. We treat them as money, but if everybody agreed to call salt pepper, we could then switch the words, right? So the distinction is important in specific legal contexts. That is true. Contracts, taxation, financial disputes, court. I love how it always asked if I would like help. AI is very helpful. But here's the thing. Most of the people in the system are very helpful. When I called a welfare office today just to talk, and the person I got to was very helpful. Why? Because I asked for help and I was asking questions and I was nice. And that's something that I think gets us a lot in return. So, what is money? I think we started that whole thing out with the ideal that we would figure out what money is.
What is
I'm not
income?
sure. What is income? That's right. What is income? I love seeing older forms of money, and I thought this might be applicable because it's Texas, but Texas was a republic. Well, technically, it's still a republic and a democracy, but we won't get into that right now. This is the type of money that they had back then. Look at this. It's got all kinds of things here. It's got a seal. It's got a signature. It has an amount. All kinds of cool things right there. But then if
1830.
you, I know, right? I think Texas was a republic for like 5 or 6 years back in the 1830s.
Still is.
What's that?
I said it still is.
It is. There is. Yes, it's still there. The republic
We
still
just
exists.
assume that they're not.
Now this is interesting. This is a silver $1 silver. This is a silver certificate. Notice it looks a whole lot like a modern Federal Reserve promissory note because they didn't want to change it over too much. They wanted to leave things looking the same. One may argue that maybe the color on it has some type of meaning too because it's in blue. But there's also currency out there that is in red. Now that one was redeemable. You could take it in and get silver in return for it, right? And so I had a conversation recently with someone, and they said I thought the goal was to get back to a gold-based currency, and my numbers may be wrong here, but right now, we have about 93 trillion dollars in debt in the United States allegedly. That debt is the money. If you were to, if some alien were to land and give 93 trillion dollars into this system and paid off the debt, all of our money would disappear. I don't know about y'all, but I still want to go out and get my milk and my bread tomorrow, right? Um, and there's other types of currency too. I have all kinds of currency, different types, just saved up. Some of it has red writing on it, and back in I think they stopped issuing that in 1963. It's a United States note. You can look it up. Just type in 1963 red ink dollar bill, and it'll pop it up. And that is a dollar bill that was drawn on the full faith and credit of the United States, but without the Federal Reserve. And so, if you really want to dig into this system, it gets very, very deep. But one of the things that, so we found out there's no income, there's no money. Let's look at the definition of expense. I may have already brought this up, but an expense is that which is expended, the expenditure of money. There we go. The expenditure of money.
Yeah.
Let's look at another one because I
Definition
was
of debt
talking
would be a good one.
debt. There's actually no debt. Everybody's worried about the debt. And earlier you were talking about the fact that Jesus paid off the debt, and Satan's constantly trying to trick us into thinking there's still debt. What is debt? A sum of money due. Now, here's what I know we've been talking about applications, and I know that Lisa and I have been talking about different things, but you have to understand what we've talked about during our time here is the crux of this entire system. It is really the heart of everything, this entire realm. If you understand who you are and you understand debt, because Jesus died for us on a wooden accounting cross. What's a cross? Debits and credits. It's a ledger. What's a ledger? It's a balance sheet, a balance of debits and credits. And at the end of the day, anyone who's ever taken an accounting class should know that the goal is to get a complete balance in the debits and the credits. And that's all we've been doing since Babylon, probably before. But what is a debt? A sum of money due. Ha ha! There we go again. A specified sum of money owing to one person from another. Now, here's a good part right down here when it says a fixed and certain obligation to pay money or some other valuable thing or things, either in the present or in the future. And that's what we're doing in this system. We are pretending that at some time in the future, there will be money and we can pay off these debts. And this has been going on since, well, a long time, but in this particular fiat currency system, since about 1912, 1914, somewhere in there, up to from about 1935 is when they things happen progressively. You don't just you roll things out slowly. You don't change them all at once. Speaking of which, does anyone know what the next system of currency that we're getting ready to enter into is? Cryptocurrency. And everyone is going to be afraid. Not everyone, a lot of people won't. But hopefully, Lisa and I, you'll stick around and we'll get to talk about why you shouldn't be afraid of this switch in this system. And also why it would be a waste of time for you to spend any emotional energy thinking, man, we've got to get back to a gold or silver based system or
Oh, yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that share that sentiment, and by no means do I think that you should not invest in silver and gold. It's still a very valuable asset to have if you have the money to spend on it and to it, right? The Federal Reserve notes to exchange for such a good. But some things that I want to add here and emphasize is one, everything that we talk about here is biblical. So going from the most recent things said to even further in the things that John has said, the switch to a digital currency, which is going to be crypto and is crypto, it's in the Bible. You know, that has been Satan's goal for the longest time is to have that one world nation, one world government, you know, whatever you want to call it. There's a million different names for it, but that that switch is definitely right in line with scripture
Mhm.
and what we see happening you know, in the end times in the book of Revelation. However, just like John said, there's nothing to be afraid of. God does not give us a spirit of fear. The spirit of fear is of the kingdom of hell. The devil wants you to be afraid because then he can distract you from the good news, which is that Jesus died on a cross and he has paid every single debt possible. That's why there is no debt. That's why there is no nothing to worry about. I mean, the Bible says so many times, not to worry, to cast your worries on the Lord because he cares for you. So what I want to point out is this system, I mean, what the devil does, and I can't remember what scripture it is, but he turns things upside down. That's what he does. He tells you the opposite of what God designs and the systems that God has created for us to operate within. And that comes all the way down to, again, there is no debt, right? Because Jesus died on a cross and he paid the debt for our sins in every possible way. And when I say there's not any kind of debt, there's literally not any kind of debt. It's all just an illusion that God or that the devil has been trying to sell us. And what's really important is for you to stay vigilant, to be discerning, to stay in prayer, to get in the word. And what's really important is realizing that you do not live in the world that you think you do, that pretty much everything is the opposite of what the truth is. So I want to tie it back to a practical application of debt and credit. I'm gonna name drop Dave Ramsey here. Okay, he's a very popular. I think he's a shill. Okay, but he's a very popular voice out there who constantly talks about how debt is horrible. You shouldn't have any debt. You shouldn't take on any credit. Okay, which then we're told is debt, which is an oxymoron in a way, right? Because how can a credit be a debt, right? But that's a different conversation. So when we look at what is the most commonly accepted beliefs, right? So we look at middle America, for example, middle class in America. We're told, try not to have any debt. You want to be debt free as much as possible, which we know is not possible. But that's what we're told, right? Again, coming back to this conversation about assumptions, we have an assumption of what debt is. And they say, you want to have good credit, and you want to make sure you pay all your debts, and don't take on more credit than you can handle that you can pay off, right? Which again is kind of an oxymoron because if you're being credited something, why would I have to pay that off? I'm being given it, right? So goes back to the conversation of pretend, goes back to the conversation of assumptions, but the overarching point I want to make here, guys, is like I said, one, get into the word, right? You need to know the Bible inside out. You need to know what God says about this system. What does God believe about debt, right? There is no debt. Okay, that's kind of what it comes down to. So do that, right? Get in your word. I definitely need to be better about like reading my Bible every single day. So I will be the first to, point the finger at myself of being guilty of this. But we want to make sure we're doing that. You also need to make sure that you are questioning all of your assumptions, and you also need to make sure and cross-referencing with the Bible. Okay, that's very important that any assumption you have, you go back, you look at the root of different words. I also like to, as I'm reading the Bible, look upwards, look at etymology dictionary and look at what these words mean. Uh, and then the last thing that I'll say that you want to make sure you're doing and being vigilant about is realize that this system inverts everything. That is what Satan does. Okay. God wants to empower you and give you absolute clarity. Okay. God's intention is not to confuse you. The devil's intention is to confuse you because the more he can confuse you, the more he can steer you away from the good news. Right? from getting to know Christ. So again, be discerning, be very vigilant, and know that pretty much everything is upside down in the system, and it's probably the opposite of what you're being taught. And make sure that you are doing your due diligence. You've got your Bible, you've got your Black's Law, you've got your, etymology dictionary. And maybe if you want to pick up like a contract textbook or different things like that, those are all extras. But really, those things can get you very far.
I had 3 books when I first started out. And the very first document that I got into was this one right here. Let me find it real quick. Oh, it's on here. Hold on just a moment. Earlier, you were talking about an affidavit. And this affidavit is, I'm having a little trouble navigating here with all the stuff on my screen. It's a little different for me here. Here we go. Here, I'm going to make this larger. There is a document out there. Now, there's hundreds of maxims of law, thousands actually. I have a book that was written in probably 1910 or '03 or 1896 or 1880 or something like that. That's just full of just legal maxims. And what is a maxim? A maxim is it's basically a rule of thumb, something that's proven to be true over and over and over. But there are 10 maxims that I found many years ago. 2011 actually was when I really started studying, 2011, 2012. And I found these 10 maxims, and they're pretty easy to find. If you will just do a Google search for 10 legal maxims Bible reference, it'll pop this up. It's on a website called Understand Contract Law and You Win. I'm not stumping for them or anything. I'm just saying that's where you can find this document. It's out there at other places too. But these maxims are all backed up by biblical references. And at the time that I found this, I was a complete and total agnostic atheist. I was not a follower, but I could not study. I knew that I really wanted to understand this system more. And one of the things that dug me into this system, if you go into our Facebook group, there's some documents in there about a conditional acceptance I wrote to an unemployment agency in Indiana because they wanted $15,000 from me. But at the bottom of the document, they said, you have 10 days to appeal. And then underneath that, they said, this is a notice and cannot be appealed. I have that document and I'll show it at a future time, but it's also in the documents section of our group. And I thought, what does that mean? That doesn't make any sense. What can I do then? It seems like my hands are tied. And that's the thing. So many people out there feel helpless. They're getting foreclosed on. They've got a criminal thing. They've got a tax thing. Something is going on. Everybody has some commercial matter going. And I wanted to figure out how I could remove my anger and my fear at all this system. And it literally has taken me until recently to get to that point. But if you look at these are the 10 maxims that we would probably consider the most significant. They're the ones to start with. It's like when you start learning to read, you don't want to start with the letter X. You start with the letter S and the letter T and the letter A, right? And these maxims, sometimes they'll seem like a workman is worthy of his hire. You really have to ponder these. And the more you read them, the more you understand them. But they get all the way down, all are equal under the law, and commerce truth is sovereign. By the way, because of that word sovereign, this document is in a few legal cases right now where I'm being accused of being a cult leader. And this document right here is being admitted as evidence by folks who are misled, let's say. And if you look up these references, now the funny thing is when I first read this, I was so estranged from God's word that I didn't even know how to look these things up. I'm like, what is a num 32? I did
What's a
not know.
Lev? I have a brother named Lev.
Where do I find 11, 19, 11 through 13? I literally didn't know how to look this stuff up. It was hilarious. But look at this right here. Truth is expressed in the form of an affidavit. There's only one other form of truth that is higher than that, and that's the word of a dying man or woman. The ideal being that if you're dying, you probably don't have a whole lot to lie about, right? But These are the main maxims you're going to want to look at. You're going to want to understand what an affidavit is. And here we go. An unrebutted affidavit stands as truth in commerce. If somebody does not rebut it, it's true if you can stand on it, if you remain standing on it. An unrebutted affidavit becomes the judgment in commerce. Now, listen to this one. Has anybody that's watching us right now ever gotten into a fight with their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their spouse, who be it, because somebody was mad and did not understand why somebody was mad? In order for a matter to be resolved, it must be expressed. That's do these things not resonate at some level, right? He who leaves the battlefield first loses by default. Well, there you go. What happens if I send you a letter and you send me back a counteroffer, and I send you a counteroffer and you send me a counteroffer? If one team leaves, if a baseball team leaves in the eighth inning, they just lost, right? The funny thing about everything that Lisa and I are going to teach you is you actually already know it.
Yeah.
I spent over a decade coming back to the fact that I already knew things. I just gave up the truth for the inverted lie that Satan gave me.
Yeah. Well, and the great thing, not the great thing, but what I'll say is the devil's a great liar. He's a great pretender, and he's very good at what he does
Mm-hmm.
because of assumptions. It's not that he's so intelligent and great. It's that the devil takes the truth. He'll take 99% of the truth and just if it's 1% off, then it's 100% wrong. Okay, that's what I need y'all to realize. And that's a lot of what he does. And that's why he's so good at what he does, because he just takes what God created and contorts it, right? Which is a great strategy because God is the perfect creator, right? So why go out of your way? Not that Satan can even create anything of his own. He has to distort. That's actually how pitiful he is. And in scripture, again and again, it says, he is incredibly pitiful. And I mean, there is nothing. Again, there's a reason that scripture tells you, do not be afraid, do not worry. Like, there really is nothing to be afraid of, to be worried about. Like, this realm, the more you start to see it as a game and realize that, our time here is limited and the devil really is just, he's trying his best, you know, but he's already been defeated and he knows that. And so, what it comes down to is yes, we can spend all this time, getting to know the system and learning how to navigate it. But again, remember that it's a game. You're playing this game and don't lose sight of what's actually important, which is God, right? Which is the one who laid down his life for you. And that that is the most important thing. Okay. And so that's why, when we look at something like this document, it referencing back to the Bible, that's really what we're doing here. We're just getting to know God's creation and what God did, right? The system that he built that the devil just keeps trying so hard to contort and distort and to oppress us with.
While you were talking about that, three things hit me. You were talking about how little bit of a lie it takes to dilute the truth, and I thought, how much poison do you have to add into someone's drink? Do you have to put it all as a poison? It's usually just a little. The next thing is if you're watching this and you're not a follower of Christ, I would urge you, or even if you are, to toss away all your assumptions about what you've been taught and re-enter into that book and learn it without those assumptions. The Pharisees and the Sadducees are real. They exist today. The third thing is we were talking about knowing who you are. And I love to take a group of people and go through a little mental exercise. And what I'll do is I'll point at somebody and I'll say, who are you? And of course, you get all different answers, right? I've actually had a whole room of 30 people just write on a piece of paper, who are you? And then had everybody read their answers. And then I'll point out somebody and I'll ask the words, um, who are you? What if I cut off your finger? What if we just cut off one bit of your finger? What if we cut off the whole finger? Would you be any different? Would you be any less who you are? What if we cut off a hand, an arm, both legs, your ears? At what point do you stop being you? And of course, the answer is never. I don't. Up until you die, right? Nothing really changes. I mean, a person is a person. I mean, just because you lose a leg doesn't mean you're not you. It doesn't really change who you are, which means we aren't the body. So if we aren't the body, then what are we? And that is where you really got to start digging into who you are, because it is not this body. In this realm that we are in, very little of it is real.
Mm-hmm.
You could even make an argument that none of it is real.
Yeah, certainly could. Well, this has been a great conversation as always.
Deep.
We're a little over time, but very well deserved. I think we went into some good info. I highly recommend any of you guys that want to dig into the 10 maxims of law, please do. Look up this document. You can find it. I mean, just type it into a search bar and it'll come up. This version or some
Yep.
very close version to it. It is in a lot of different places. Um, yeah, if y'all want, we do have the Facebook group in the description, and y'all can go join. Just request to join. Make sure you answer all the questions down there, or in the Facebook group, the membership questions. And that's a free group. That's a community. So if you have any questions, discussions, we welcome all of it in there. Make sure you comment under this video any questions that you have, any thoughts that you have. Our last video, amusingly enough, has gotten on an interesting side of YouTube. We've gotten quite a few normies commenting who have no clue what they're talking about. It's pretty amusing. So if we can get more of you guys who are actually engaging with this to comment, that would be even better. Not that I really mind the trolls, because I know that they don't even know what they're talking about. So yeah, go ahead and leave your comments, your questions below. And yeah, just check out the description, see what's down there. I believe I have a couple of other links. I've claimed the name down there. Check that out. I think I have the How to Win in Court course down there as well. Check that out if that's something you're interested in. And other than that, was there anything else you wanted to share, John?
Just to stick with us, because we're doing a lot of general stuff right now, but we are going to get very specific very quickly, but it's impossible to keep up if you don't know the basics.
Yeah, we got to get the foundation down first. All right, well, we will see y'all in the next one. Bye, guys.